Joseph. Thank you, Mario. Thank you for your attention. This hot-ass gym. I'm sorry, you have to. You know, these guys have never been on a plane, and so we flew here on Tuesday, so it's been a long trip. We don't go back till tomorrow. I always love going back to Homeboy Industries. You know, you just you get there and people are waiting for you. You know, once I got back and there was a homie who'd been waiting there for like 3 days in a row, waiting for me to come back because he had news. His name was Guadalupe from the gang, and when he saw me, he gave me a big abrazo. And he said, "While you were gone, my son was born." I said, "Wow, congratulations." "When was he born?" He said, "On his birthday." I said, "Wow." I mean, you know, what are the chances of that happening? But since I'm gone, you know, homies blow up my cell phone and they leave me voicemail messages. There was a homie named Moreno who I was trying to get him to change his language because he was always so mal hablado. He was always using curse words, and I would always go, language. And so he left me a voicemail message. He said, "Hey, G, this is Moreno and shit." I mean, I'm sorry, my bad. Moreno and feces. I think we can all agree that's progress. It's a privilege to be here. I've never been here before. You know, what Martin Luther King says about church could well be said about your time here at Bishop O'Dowd. It's not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from. And you go from this place, and what you do is you're armed with a vision of wanting the world to look differently than it currently looks. Good for you. The prophet Habakkuk writes, "The vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, wait for it." But none of us want to wait for too long, you know, waiting for something to happen. Part of your education here at O'Dowd is to make something happen. And the thing that you want to make happen, of course, is the creation of a community of kinship such that God, in fact, might recognize it. Part of the point of an education like the high-quality one you get here at O'Dowd is to create in the world a circle of compassion that keeps widening because of your efforts. You want to include more people inside that circle. And so you find your way out to the margins, the edges of the circle, where the poor and the powerless and the voiceless are standing. And you stand with them. And you stand with those whose burdens are more than they can bear, and with those whose dignity has been denied. Every once in a while you get to stand with the easily despised and the readily left out, with the demonized, so that the demonizing will stop, and with the disposable, so that the day will come when you stop throwing people away, when we stop throwing people away as a society. I suspect that if kinship was our goal, we would no longer be promoting justice, we would in fact be celebrating it. For no kinship, no justice. No kinship, no peace. And that's how it works, I think. You know, for 25 years I've been working with gang members, and I'm so grateful to them. People like Joseph and Mario who've taught me so much. All the things that are of value. But in the last couple of years, the homies have taught me how to text, and I couldn't be more grateful to them. I find that it sure beats the heck out of actually talking to people. And so I'm pretty good at it, you know, LOL and OMG and BTW. And the homies have taught me a new one, OHN, which apparently stands for, oh hell no. And I've been using that one quite a bit lately. So there I am with two homies, Manuel and Boncho, and older vatos have been to prison and tattooed, and they do a variety of things for me. And so we're driving to Palm Desert to a high school to give a talk, and Manuel's in the front seat, shotgun, and suddenly he has an incoming message, and he kind of reads it and he chuckles to himself. I said, well, what is it? He goes, oh, it's dumb, it's from Snoopy back at the office. Well, I'd just seen Snoopy. Snoopy gave me a big abrazote as the day began. Snoopy and Manuel worked together in the clock-in room, where they clock in hundreds and hundreds of our workers, all gang members. have about 400 employees. And so it's a tough job. And so I said, well, what's he say? Oh gosh, so Manuel says it's dumb. Hang on a second, let me find it here. Hey dog, it's me, Snoops. Yeah, they got my ass locked up at county jail. They're charging me with being the ugliest vato in America. You have to come down right now, show them they got the wrong guy. Well, we died laughing, the three of us, and then I realized that Manuel and Snoopy are enemies. They're from rival gangs. They used to shoot bullets at each other. Now they shoot text messages. And there's a word for that, and the word is kinship. How do we obliterate once and for all the illusion that we're separate, where there is no longer an us and them, there's just us? Mother Teresa, I think, diagnosed the world's ills correctly when she suggested that the problem in the world is that we've just forgotten that we belong to each other. So how do we stand against forgetting that? How do we widen the circle so more people are included? Or there's an idea that's taken root in the world, it's at the root of all that's wrong with it. And the idea would be this, that there just might be lives out there that matter less than other lives. How do we stand against that? How do we achieve this kinship? I never felt this more keenly in my life than some years ago. I struggled with cancer, with leukemia, and I went through chemotherapy, and feeling pretty good at the moment. Or as the homies still say to me, I hear your cancer's in. Apparently it stepped out to the lobby to buy popcorn. But the news was on the front page of the Sunday LA Times, and so word spread kind of quickly, and homies came out of the woodworks. I remember a homegirl left me a message on my voicemail. Her name was Gina. She said, now it's our turn to take care of you. Very sweet. Remember this one vato named Grumpy, 6'4", huge, fullbacker kind of guy, and standing in front of my desk, in big tears in his eyes, and apparently God had forgotten to give him a neck, you know, and he's standing there, and he looks at me, and he says, what do I have that you need, you know, meaning organs, and I was really happy to tell him I didn't need any, but it was the thought that counted. One of my favorites was a homie named Loco, Crazy Ace, who called me from jail, collect. And he had just read this in the newspaper, and he said, hey, what's up with this leukemia anyway? And I said, well, it's cancer, you know, it's in the blood. The doctor says my white count's too high. Because the doctors, they don't be knowing nothing. I said, well, what do you mean? Well, hello, of course your white count's high. So you might call that a second opinion, but I call it kinship. You know, Homeboy Industries was born during the time I was pastor of the poorest parish in the city of Los Angeles, Dolores Mission Parish, and nestled in the middle of two public housing projects, Pico Gardens and Aliso Village. At the time, it was the largest grouping of public housing west of the Mississippi. We had 8 gangs at war with each other during the time I was there, and making it the place of the highest concentration of gang activity in the whole city of Los Angeles. My parish was that. I didn't know that. I buried my first young person killed because of this sadness in 1988, and I buried my 185th a week ago Tuesday, a young man named Angel, who I'd known for most of his life. So we did a lot of things. We started a school first because we had so many junior high gang members who had been given the boot from their home school. Nobody wanted them. So I walked out into the projects, and they were kind of violent and selling drugs and creating trouble. So I said, if I found a school that would take you, would you go? And to my surprise, they all said, yeah. And then I couldn't find a school that would take them. So I forced my hand, and we started a school. The nuns moved out of the convent on the 3rd floor of our elementary school, and we turned it into Dolores Mission Alternative, a school for gang members. That brought gang members in large number to the church, and then they said if only we had jobs. And so myself and the women in the parish marched around the factories that surrounded the projects, trying to find felony-friendly employers. And we couldn't find that many, so we couldn't wait any longer. And so in 1992, after the unrest in Los Angeles, we started Homeboy Bakery. Took over this bakery across the street from the church, been abandoned. And enemy rival gang members baked bread together. A month later, we started Homeboy Tortillas at the Grand Central Market. And once we had plural, we came up with the highfalutin Homeboy Industries, as if there was any industry involved in this. Everything worked, I'll be the first to admit it. Homeboy Plumbing was really not a huge success. Who knew? People didn't want gang members in their homes. I didn't see that coming. And now, we didn't intend to do this, but we've backed our way into becoming the largest gang intervention rehab and reentry program in the United States. 1,100 gangs in LA County and 120,000 gang members, so about 15,000 folks a year walk through our doors seeking exactly the same things as Joseph and Mario. We have a lot of classes, as they mentioned, anger management, parenting, and such. Case managers, therapists, everybody's in therapy. Free tattoo removal. No place on the planet Earth removes more tattoos than we do. We have a designated clinic, 3 laser machines, 31 volunteer doctors. We remove 10,000 tattoos a year. So if any of you are regretting that dragon tattoo you have, please see me. All right, don't regret it. Tattoo removal was born because of a guy named Frank who wandered out of Corcoran State Prison. 2 days out of prison, he's sitting right in front of me with a big kind of billboard tattooed across his forehead, filling the entire space, and pardon my language, but it said, "Fuck the world." And he looked at me and he said, "You know, I am having a hard time finding a job." I said, "Well, Frank, maybe we could put our heads together on this one." So I went to find a doctor, and he started to chip away at Frank's forehead and a couple others. He gave me 1 hour a month to do this, and pretty soon I had a waiting list of 3,000. So now we remove lots and lots of tattoos or any barriers to employment. We have all our businesses. We have solar panel installation training program. We have 5 mini farms where we produce produce for our restaurants. We have a diner at City Hall, the only place you can buy food there. We have Homeboy Bakery, Homeboy Silkscreen. We're about to open a restaurant in the American Airlines extension at LAX. Homeboy Homegirl Merchandise, where we sell our logo stuff. Farmers Markets, as Joseph mentioned. What else? Homegirl Cafe, where women with records, young ladies from rival gangs, waitresses with attitude will gladly take your order. This past year we had Oscar-winning actress Diane Keaton show up for lunch. She is a big movie star. She won an Academy Award for Annie Hall. She's in all the Godfather movies. And so she shows up for lunch, and she's there with a guy who's there once a week. And her waitress this day is Glenda, and she's a homegirl, been there, done that, gang member, tattooed, felon, been to prison. She doesn't know who Diane Keaton is, so she's taking her order, and Diane Keaton says, "Well, what do you recommend?" And Glenda rattles off the 3 platillos that she particularly likes, and Diane Keaton says, "Well, I'll have that second one. That one sounds good." And it's at that moment something dawns on Glenda. She looks at Diane Keaton, she goes, "Wait a minute, I feel like I know you from somewhere. I don't know, like maybe we've met." And Diane Keaton decides to sort of deflect it humbly, and she goes, "Oh gosh, I don't know, I suppose I have one of those faces that people think they've seen before." And then Glenda goes, "No, now I know. We were locked up together. Well, that just took my breath away when I heard it, and I don't believe we've had any further Diane Keaton sightings now that I think of it. But suddenly kinship so quickly, Oscar-winning actress, attitudinal waitress, exactly what God had in mind. And Jesus tells us with some clarity what it exactly is on his mind when he looks out at us and he says, that you may be one. I suppose he could have said more about himself, but it's really about us. It's about this mutuality. It's about this distance that we create sometimes between ourselves and others. One of the great privileges of my life was knowing Cesar Chavez as a friend. And I remember once a reporter commented to him and said, wow, these farm workers, they sure love you. And Cesar shrugged and he said, the feeling's mutual. And that's what we hope for. How do we arrive at this mutuality where there is no us and them, there's just us? All of us are called to be what Alice Miller, the late great child psychologist, calls enlightened witnesses, people who through your kindness and tenderness and focused, attentive love return people to themselves. You don't hold the bar up and ask anybody to measure up, you just show up and you hold the mirror up and you tell people the truth, knowing that your truth is my truth is a gang member's truth, and it's all the same truth. And here's the truth. You are exactly what God had in mind when God made you. And then you watch as people become that truth, especially those on the margins, as they inhabit that truth. And no bullet can pierce it. No 4 prison walls can keep it out. And death can't touch it because it's huge. But sometimes you have to reach in and you have to dismantle messages of shame and disgrace that get in the way, that keep you from seeing the truth. Lately I've been taking a leisurely stroll through the Acts of the Apostles, and I suppose you could read it and see it as a quaint snapshot of the earliest life of the earliest Christian community, or you can read it and see it as the measure of the health of any community. All sorts of things will leap out at you then. Things like, see how they love one another. Another one is, there's nobody needy in this community. But the one that I love the most is the one that just completely leapt out at me, and it goes like this. And awe came upon everyone. That the measure of our health as a community is our ability to stand in awe at what the poor have to carry, rather than stand in judgment at how they carry. Last year I was invited to give a training on gangs at Richmond, Virginia to about 600 social workers. And it was an all-day thing. And so I brought 2 homies with me. Andre, African-American gang member who worked at the time in our store, and Jose, a Latino gang member in his mid to late 20s who was a member of our substance abuse team, man solid in his recovery, so he was helping homies with their recovery. A man who had been in prison and tattooed, a gang member, but he was also homeless for a long stretch and a heroin addict for even longer. So I had them get up and tell their stories, and I'd never heard their stories before. And so Jose gets up in kind of a self-effacing, humble way, and he says, I guess you could say my mom and me, we didn't get along so good. I guess I was 6 years old when she looked at me and she said, why don't you just kill yourself? You're such a burden to me. And the whole audience gasped. And then he said, it sounds way worser in Spanish, he said to them. Everybody laughed. He said, I guess I was 9 when my mom drove me down to the deepest part of Baja California. And she walked me right up to an orphanage and she said, I found this kid. And she left me there I was there for 90 days until my grandmother could get out of my mom where she had dumped me, and she came and she rescued me. My mom beat me every single day of my elementary school years with things you could imagine and a lot of things you couldn't. Every day my back was bloodied and scarred. In fact, I wore 3 t-shirts to school every day. First t-shirt, because the blood would seep through, and second t-shirt, oh, you could still see it. Finally, the third t-shirt, you couldn't see any blood. Kids at school would make fun of me. Hey, fool, it's 100 degrees. Why are you wearing 3 t-shirts? Then he chokes back his tears and he can't barely continue. He seems to be staring at some piece of his story only he can see. He finally says, I wore 3 t-shirts well into my adult years because I was ashamed of my wounds. I didn't want anybody to see them. And now I welcome my wounds. I run my fingers over my scars. My wounds are my friends. After all, how can I help heal the wounded if I don't welcome my own wounds? And awe came upon everyone. Nobody in this room has ever met a hopeful kid who joined a gang. That's never happened. Gangs are the places kids go when they've encountered their life as a misery. And who doesn't know by now that misery loves company? No kid is seeking anything when he joins a gang. He's always fleeing something, always. But we get this diagnosis wrong only all the time. So there I was on the Dr. Phil show. Yeah, I know, what was I thinking? But anyway, he was going to dedicate the whole show to Homeboy Industries, and he was going to try to sell my book, I guess. So it seemed like a good idea, and we thought we had talked the producers down from doing something crazy, and we thought we had succeeded. And there I was backstage, and Dr. Phil says, and now, ladies and gentlemen, the founder and executive director of Homeboy Industries, Father Greg Boyle. And I walk out there, and it's a live audience, and to my horror, on the stage is facilities as a priest, where I say Mass, jails and juvenile halls and probation camps. And I was in this one camp in a gym, and there were 100 gang members there, and I did Mass. And when I was finished with Mass, I was taking my vestments off, and the homies were hanging around and talking. And one homie said, "Hey, I saw you on Oprah." I said, "Well, no, actually it was Dr. Phil." "Oh," I said, "Yeah, I have a hard time telling those two apart myself." And a homie over here said, "You were on Dr. Phil? Fighting with your wife?" Okay, see, priests can't get married anyway. So these homies died laughing over here, and this homie didn't know why we were laughing. And I said, "Yes, you know, Dr. Phil gave me a lot of advice. I'm doing much better now, thank you." So wind it down here. All of us are called to be enlightened witnesses, to return people to themselves, and in the process you get returned to yourself. And that's the whole deal. And so you will find ways, as students here at O'Dowd, how to stand at the margins. Because the hope is that the circle will widen because you decided to stand there. And people will accuse you of wasting your time because that's what people do. But the prophet Jeremiah says that in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. And isn't that the job description of everybody in this gym, but to make those voices heard? So people always ask me about enemies working side by side with each other, and it's kind of difficult at first. a homie will come to me and say, I'm ready, ready, ready. And I'll say, okay, I have an opening in the bakery, but you have to work with X, Y, and Z. And I rattle off the names of rivals, enemies. And homies always do the same thing. They think for a long ass time, and then they say, okay, I'll work with them, but I'm not going to talk to them. Which used to bother me in the old days, until you discover, of course, that it's impossible for human beings to sustain that. You can't demonize people you know. So I had a kid named Youngster, a little tiny guy, who I thought was ready to work, and so I brought him to our Homeboy silkscreen factory. It's our only business kind of off campus. Huge warehouse about this size, and filled with machines and dryers and that kind of thing. And I'm introducing him to his 30 coworkers, and I'm walking him through the place, and I watch him as he shakes hands with each one of his coworkers. Some of them, in fact, are enemies. But he shakes their hands and looks in their eyes, and I think, wow, this is great. Until Youngster gets around the bend to the very last guy, a guy who seems to be wanting to avoid this encounter altogether, a kid we all call Puppet. And when Puppet and Youngster are in each other's vicinity, they mumble something, they stare at their shoes, they don't shake hands. Well, I know they're enemies because I know what gangs they're from, but he just finished shaking hands with other enemies. I discover later that these guys have a hatred that's really quite personal and deep, beyond which they don't think they could really get past. So I sense that much at the moment. And so I look at them and I say, if you guys can't hang working together, just let me know. I got a bunch of people who would love this job. And they don't say a word. Well, 6 months later, Puppet goes to a store some distance from his home, one of those little corner stores, and he buys something. And on his way home, for some reason, he decides to take a shortcut, so he dodges into an alley. Because he's taken this detour suddenly, unexpectedly, he's surrounded by 10 members of a rival gang, 10 against 1. And they beat him badly. When he falls to the ground, they will not stop kicking his head until he's lifeless. Somebody finds his body and takes him to White Memorial Hospital, where he's declared effectively brain dead. But it's the policy at the hospital to keep you connected to machines for 48 hours, 2 straight days, so you can get 2 days of a flat read with no brain activity at all. And then the doctors sign the death certificates, making it official. This allowed family and friends to gather. I was at St. Louis University giving a talk. I flew home right away. I've seen a lot of horrible things in my life, but nothing to compare to the sight of this young man with his head swollen many times in size. It was horrifying. You could barely train your eyes on him. And at the end of the 48-hour period, I gave him a blessing. I anointed his forehead with oil. We disconnected, and I buried him a week later. But in the first 24 hours after he had been beaten, and as he was lying in the hospital, I'm alone in my office. It's 8:30 at night, and the phone rings, and it's Youngster, Puppet's co-worker from the silkscreen factory. He says, "Hey, that's messed up about what happened to Puppet." I said, "Yeah, it is." And then with a certain kind of eagerness even, he says, "Is there anything I can do? Can I give him my blood?" We both fall silent under the weight of it, until finally he breaks the silence, choking back his tears, and he says with great deliberation, "He was not my enemy. He was my friend. We worked together." And now, can I say that always happens at Homeboy Industries? Yeah, of course. Any exceptions? No. And it shouldn't surprise us that God's own dream come true for us, that we be one. It just happens to be our own deepest longing for ourselves. Because it turns out it's mutual. And so Bishop O'Dowd is not the place you've come to, it's the place you go from, so that you can stand in the right place at the very edges of the margins, so that you can dismantle the barriers that exclude. People will accuse you of wasting your time. But in this place of which you say it is a waste, there will be heard again the voice of mirth and the voice of gladness, the voices of those who sing. So go ahead and make those voices heard. For the vision still has its time, presses on to fulfillment, and it will not disappoint. And if it delays, we wait for it. Thank you all very much.
There are very few moments in my life that are marked with such poignancy. You know, these kinds of events that you have, don't ever take them for granted. When we have a wonderful presence of people who connect us with the rest of the world and connect us with people in need who are hopeless, these are the moments when we can begin to believe that we are hope. So what I would like to do is ask you to stand. Let's just all stand on our feet. Don't go anywhere. And just close your eyes for a minute, just for me. Close your eyes. It's going to stop in a second. And just think for a moment about what we are blessed with and women in this world. And let us thank our God for all the good gifts He has given us. And we pray for the people of Homeboy Industries. By the words of Mario and Joseph and Father Boyle. Can I hear an amen? Amen. All right. Thank you very much.